Ever since the partition of British India in 1947, the region of Kashmir has been fractured by competing territorial claims. By the late summer of 1965, that dispute materialized into thousands of tons of steel tearing across the subcontinent. The ensuing clash deployed so much armor that it resulted in the largest massed tank engagements the world had seen since the end of the Second World War. Yet, look at the map of this mechanized destruction. Despite the staggering scale of the armadas involved, the ultimate shift in the border was exactly zero. To understand this stalemate, we have to look at the opening moves. A localized failure in stealth infiltration forced an immediate, severe escalation into heavy conventional warfare. The 1965 conflict demonstrates exactly what happens when immense mechanized density meets a lack of operational breakthrough. It paralyzes two vast armies in a brutal meat grinder of attrition. In August 1965, Indian-administered Kashmir was a heavily militarized but porous mountainous zone. Pakistani Rizaship launched Operation Gibraltar, an asymmetric maneuver designed around stealth and strict deniability. The plan required slipping irregular forces across the ceasefire line to blend in and incite a massive civilian rebellion from within the valley. But the local population did not rebel. The anticipated internal uprising completely failed to materialize. Stripped of cover, the scattered Pakistani infantry units were identified and systematically neutralized by Indian forces. Gibraltar's collapse presented Pakistani commanders with a hard choice: either withdraw and accept the failure or attempt to salvage the operation with a heavy conventional assault. Pakistan chose to escalate, initiating Operation Grand Slam. The tactical map instantly shifted. Scattered infantry operations dissolved, replaced by a concentrated armored spearhead. The target of this new thrust was a vital choke point, the Akhnor sector. Taking Akhnor would physically cut the main supply and communication arteries connecting Indian forces in the Kashmir Valley to the rest of the country. The localized Indian defensive lines buckled. Light infantry and scattered outposts were suddenly facing a concentrated wall of heavy armor. With Akhnor under severe threat, the Indian High Command recognized a fatal geographic disadvantage. They could not win a reactive, purely defensive war within the restrictive terrain of Kashmir. To relieve the localized pressure, India applied the doctrine of horizontal escalation, opening an entirely new theater of war to force the enemy to redeploy. Instead of reinforcing Akhnor, the Indian military pushed directly across the international border into Punjab, heading straight for Lahore. The maneuver worked. Pakistani commanders halted their offensive, diverting their heavy armor south to intercept. The primary theater of the conflict instantly shifted out of the mountains and into the flat, open terrain of the Punjab plains. By forcing this redeployment, India secured Akhnor, but the cost was ensuring a catastrophic head-on collision between both nations' primary armored reserves. This collision culminated in September with the massive engagements at Asal Uttar and Shawinda. Hundreds of tanks squared off in tight geographical pockets, backed by intense artillery barrages and extensive air support from both militaries. The plains became graveyards of steel. This image shows the aftermath: shattered Sherman tanks and severe infantry casualties scattered across the heavily contested dirt. Despite the massive application of firepower, neither military possessed the deep logistical supply lines required to pierce a pier-level armored defense. While the macro-level armor ground to a halt, there were isolated tactical successes. Indian infantry managed a difficult capture of the strategic Haji Pir Pass in Kashmir, a moment captured here by their officers in the field. But localized victories could not overcome the broader operational exhaustion. After weeks of high-intensity combat, both armies were running critically low on ammunition, fuel, and functioning hardware. The sheer volume of static firepower outpaced the ability to maneuver. The rapid, ambitious escalation collapsed into a static, paralyzed front line. By late September 1965, the military reality was undeniable. Both sides had spent their offensive capabilities. This mutual exhaustion paved the way for international intervention. On September 23rd, a United Nations-mandated ceasefire officially paused the fighting. The conflict required a formal diplomatic resolution, which materialized months later in January 1966 as the Tashkent Agreement. Indian Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri traveled to sign the treaty on behalf of his government. Meeting him at the negotiating table was Pakistani President Ayub Khan. The core military mandate of the agreement was absolute, a mutual withdrawal of all forces back to their pre-war boundary lines. Every inch of captured territory was returned. This chart tracks the immediate economic consequence. In the wake of the treaty, both India and Pakistan initiated a sharp upward spike in their defense budgets to replace the massive hardware losses. The 1965 war yielded no territory, but it deeply scarred the subcontinent. It battle-tested two massive militaries, permanently heightened the regional friction, and built the exact mechanical baseline that would ignite again in the 1971 war.